Welcome to the Fit Woman Formula podcast, where we show women just like you how to reclaim your energy, rebuild your body, and step into you 2.0. I'm Coach Jonathan, founder and head coach of the Fit Woman Formula coaching program. This show is for women who are tired of starting over and ready to finally create results that last. Not just weight loss, but real confidence, a healthier relationship with food, a stronger mindset, and a lifestyle that finally lasts. You can watch full episodes on YouTube or listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you enjoy podcasts. And if you're ready to learn more about how we can help you unlock the energy and confidence of your 20s while dropping 2+ sizes in the next 12 weeks, visit fitwomanformula.com. All right, let's get into today's episode. 3 out of 4 women report having an unhealthy relationship with food. 3 out of 4. And one of the biggest drivers behind that number is emotional eating. And you've probably heard it called, or maybe you call it yourself, stress eating, boredom eating, comfort eating. It's got different names and different labels, but it's really the same problem. And here's what makes it so frustrating. You know what's happening. You're not even hungry, but you can't stop. And every time it happens, you feel like you failed again. Today, we're going to talk about why emotional eating happens, why willpower alone is never going to fix it, and what actually works. Now, let's define this clearly, because I think a lot of ladies have maybe a narrow view of what emotional eating looks like. And it's not just eating when you're stressed, okay? It's using food to cope with any emotion. Stress, boredom, loneliness, overwhelm, and even as a celebration or a reward. So if you've ever eaten not because you're hungry, but because you needed something, there was a hole that you were trying to fill, that's emotional eating. And here's something that I want you to hear. Every single time that I speak with a woman who's struggling to lose weight and she's reaching out to us for help, there's one question that I ask, and it's, is emotional eating a problem for you? And I'm going to tell you 8 or 9 times out of 10, the answer is yes. But then when I ask what she's doing directly to address it, to actually work on and improve her emotional response to stress and her relationship with food, the answer is almost always the same on this end too. It's nothing. And it's not because you don't care. It's just because no one has showed you how. Now, I'm going to tell you that this is not something that I set out to specialize in. When I started coaching women over a decade ago, I was focused primarily on workouts and nutrition because I do love those things. And that's a big part of what we work on is, how to get your food dialed in and, beyond just things like emotional eating, how to get strong and lift heavy in the gym and have good workout form and track your workouts like a pro and all these cool things. Okay. But what kept showing up over and over, regardless of, what we were working on, was this. It was women who couldn't lose weight and couldn't feel their best, not because they couldn't stick to the plan or be consistent, but because of their relationship with food. At the root of so many struggles I was seeing, the poor body image, okay, the inconsistency, the falling off, the starting over, the frustration, was emotional eating. And I realized pretty quickly that if I was not helping women work through this, I wasn't helping them at all. I couldn't help them reach their full potential. I want to tell you a story about Alicia. This is someone that I've known for a long, long time. And Alicia and I actually grew up together. And I'll tell you, just to give you an idea of how long ago this is, some of my very first or oldest memories that I have are with Alicia when I was like in pre-K. And it's kind of interesting because, we didn't stay in touch all these years. We kind of drifted apart, when we were little and I moved somewhere else and we both had our own lives. But come to find out, we both struggled with our weight over the years, which is why I felt such a connection with what she was going through when we started working together. And when Alicia came to me, emotional eating and really food overall was running her life. And I mean that literally. What I'm going to share isn't a secret. This is something that she's already shared publicly and we talked about. She had a standing weekly routine of going to TCBY. It was like a love affair with TCBY. And we would joke about it, but this was not an occasional thing. This was every single week. She was so regular with this, in fact, just to give you an idea of how deep this went. She was really good friends with the employees, and she was bringing them hand-me-down clothes from her daughter, and, that's how often she was there. Now, I'm not telling you this to embarrass her. I'm telling you that because Alicia is one of the most self-aware, hardworking women that I've ever coached. And she knew it was happening. The problem is she didn't know how to stop it. So here's what we did. We attacked it from two sides, the strategic side and the mindset side. And both of them matter a lot. So you need to understand what is involved in both of these here. Now, the reality is that most programs out there, most things you're going to try, they only address one of these. And I don't think they do it very well. But look, they give you a meal plan and maybe they tell you to, hit your macros, or maybe it's a completely different thing. It's not even health and fitness coaching. It's like life coaching or something. And they'll tell you to journal and meditate. You rarely find these things being put together. All of this stuff is necessary. So let me break down what each one looks like here. So first we have the strategic side of things, as I mentioned, okay? And before we even get into the mindset work, we really have to look at what's setting you up for emotional eating in the first place. Because a lot of what looks and feels like emotional eating is really just your body running on empty. You could be setting yourself up for this type of eating without even realizing it. Let's think about some of these patterns. What does some of this look like? Skipping breakfast, eating very low protein, running around all day long. You're too busy. You don't have a real meal throughout the day. Maybe you're grabbing some stuff here or there. If you're like a lot of ladies that we talk to and we work with, you're having like coffee and maybe something for breakfast, and then it's dinner. Okay, so you're not having anything during the day, really. There's no fuel in your body. But then stress hits, and you've got nothing left in the tank. So the food becomes the only real thing that gives you relief. That is a fueling problem. That is not a willpower problem. And it connects directly to what we talked about in the last episode. When you're chronically underfueling your body, you are setting yourself up for this to happen every single time. So the strategic side starts with some very simple questions. Are you eating enough during the day? Are you getting a sufficient amount of protein? Not optimal protein, just a sufficient amount, a decent amount. Are you staying hydrated? Are you eating consistently instead of saving everything for later or running around so busy that you're not eating at all? Because if you fix those things first, emotional eating often becomes significantly easier to manage. With Alicia, this was a big piece of the puzzle. Getting her to eat more consistently during the day, okay? Not focus so much on, oh gosh, I have to eat less, so I'm losing weight. Like I've shared with you before, I call this the weight loss brain. The weight loss brain is running the show. The weight loss brain says I need to eat less. Except what you don't see is, again, stressful situation comes down, triggering you to eat so much more. And these were the types of triggers that were driving her to TCBY every week. Let's talk about the mindset side. Here's where I know I'm going to lose some of you, honestly. Okay? Because I am going to say the words journaling. I'm going to say the words meditation. And I can already feel the eye rolls, okay, through the internet. I'm feeling them right now. I want you to stay with me. If this is a real problem, I want you to stay with me. I want you to be open-minded for a moment about this stuff because I'll tell you, I was someone that was not open-minded about these things. I thought meditation and all these different things, I thought it was pointless. The truth is, I didn't understand how helpful it could be to get the physical results I wanted, how much better it could make my life overall, how much better it could make me feel day to day. I'm not asking you to sit cross-legged on a yoga mat for an hour every morning. What I'm asking you to consider is this. If emotional eating is driven by emotions and you have zero tools for managing those emotions, what do you think is going to happen? The truth is, the goal here is not to eliminate stress from your life. That's just not possible. I've got so many ladies that tell me, they want to get started. They want our help. They feel deep down that we can help, but they're waiting for this less stressful period of their life to arise. That's not going to happen for you. You might have some ebbs and flows, some kind of ups and downs, but you're going to have stress in your life. You're going to have stress. So it's not possible to eliminate it completely. But what we need to do is build a gap or put some space between the emotion and the food. Just a pause. 2 minutes of breathing before you open the fridge. A couple minutes of journaling at the end of the day. Maybe a quick journaling prompt just around how your day was. A short meditation to start your morning. These things don't require a lot of time. They do require intention. And for Alicia, the thing that made the biggest difference was meditating for a couple minutes a day. Typically what she would do is she would go do her workout in the morning, and she would sit in her car a minute before she left the gym and meditate, and that was it. And I vividly remember the conversations where she would tell me about how much better her day went in regards to food, but really just how much better her day would go overall. This wasn't an hour. This was just enough to create some space. Now, we also made sure, just like we do within our program, we were training her to regularly track her wins, not just what was going wrong, but what was going right, what was going well. Because emotional eating often gets worse when you feel like you're failing. Have you ever noticed that? But when you start seeing evidence that you're actually making progress, that even with some imperfection, that you're not blowing everything up, that you have more control than you thought, or maybe you did not that long ago, the urge to cope with food starts to lose its grip. You start to regain your power over food. Now, I want to talk to you about something that might surprise you here. Tracking your food. I know, big surprise. A lot of coaches and programs in the space will tell you that tracking food makes emotional eating worse. That seeing what you ate will trigger more guilt and more shame. I understand that concern. I certainly do. But I disagree. I disagree big time about this. Here's why. I look at tracking what you eat, like exposure therapy. And when you track your food and what you're putting in your body, something starts to happen. You create a forced pause between the emotion and the decision. You have to actually think before you eat. And over time, you start to see that the foods that you've labeled bad or dangerous or fattening or off limits, the type of thinking and language that is driving and fueling a lot of this emotional eating, this food can actually exist in your world while losing weight without everything falling apart. You start to see trends. You start to see that you have more control than you believe. And that visibility, ladies, is powerful. And with Alicia, tracking was a huge part of how she started to take back control. Now, here's a really important point about this. You see, tools can be framed differently. You might have tracked your food before and you say, no, that's not me. I want you to think of how the food tracking was being framed. Was it being framed as something restrictive where you had to eat perfectly? You could only eat certain foods. You were going right into some crazy calorie goal. You were trying to hit all your macros day one, and it was some shit that was just driving you nuts and making your life suck right off the bat? Or was it framed like we're talking about it? Here's what makes what we do different, among many other things. We don't just hand you a tracking app and leave you there forever. Okay? We give you an exit strategy. As Alicia built more confidence, as her relationship with food improved, as her relationship with herself improved, as she proved herself over and over that she could handle this, we started unwinding the tracking. I'm going to give you a really important example here. Alicia lives in New Orleans. This is where I grew up or lived until I was about 4 years old. What happens in New Orleans every year? What is a big part of life in New Orleans? Mardi Gras. So we ended up working together for some time. You know, when we first started working together, it was like, okay, I just want to lose about 10 pounds. But what happened is during our time together, she started getting better and better results. She started seeing more and more was possible. She started gaining more and more of that certainty that I've talked to you about. And so she decided, hey, I want to keep working towards this. So we worked together for a pretty long time. So we had a few Mardi Gras together. And the last Mardi Gras versus the first one, totally different. Totally different. The first one, so much fear going into this, so much concern that she was going to blow things up. And guess what? Truthfully, a lot of that fear and concern drove her towards some of that. But we didn't have the expectation that things were going to get solved overnight. We knew this was going to take some time. The last Mardi Gras where we were working together, very different. She wasn't even tracking most of it. She felt great. And again, when you're in New Orleans and you're kind of in the social scene like Alicia is and riding on floats and, you know, doing some of these different things like that, going to balls and all kinds of stuff like that, there is food around constantly. This is not you're going to one parade. This is a month-long celebration. So literally your year revolves around this. So there's a lot of food. There's a lot of eating, a lot of opportunities for temptation and to fall off track. And she did a great job. She continued making progress. It was amazing. And the cool thing is here, she didn't need the tracking anymore at a certain point. Gradually, we began pulling it back until it just wasn't necessary. A lot of people talk about intuitive eating, you know, just kind of having it built in, like, this is what I need to be eating to stay on track, to fuel my body, to maintain my weight loss goals, right? Or whatever the goal is that you're working on. Because look, the goal was never to track forever. The goal was to use it as a tool until she didn't need the tool anymore. Now, here's what happened with Alicia. For a couple months, her weight barely moved. She was doing the work. She was showing up. We were working through the TCBY relationship. And I want to be clear because here's another good example of what sets us apart. We didn't say, okay, well, you got to stop eating TCBY right off the bat because we needed her to see that she could have this stuff. She didn't have to give it up. You know, the TCBY was just a symptom of something much, much bigger. But she kept meditating. She kept tracking. She was eating better. She was lifting weights. We pulled back on all the boot camp style cardio she had been doing and started getting her into more strength training. She was getting strong, really strong, but the scale still wasn't moving a whole lot. Okay. It's primarily because the calorie intake was still pretty high. So we kept her a little closer to her maintenance calories for a while. Well, we built this foundation in the background because so many ladies that struggle with this problem, like I mentioned a moment ago, they go into tracking their food or they go into some program and the coach, without knowing anything about him or anything about what we're talking about here, says, okay, here's your super low calorie goal. And what happens? They go over that calorie goal every single day and they start to get frustrated and it just becomes a trigger for overeating. So I kept telling her the same thing, that when we solve the emotional eating problem, that's when the weight is going to start falling off. And that's exactly what happened. Once her relationship with food shifted, once the emotional eating stopped running the show, everything else started to click. She lost almost 40 pounds, dropped several sizes. Her confidence skyrocketed. Not too long after that, she got multiple promotions at work, recognized on a huge scale. It's a giant company that she works for. And she started showing up as Alicia 2.0. It wasn't because we gave her the perfect diet. It was because we helped her fix the thing that was actually holding her back. So if this sounds like you, here's what I'd like you to do. Look at the strategic side first. Are you eating enough during the day? Are you eating real meals? Are you getting enough protein? Are you staying hydrated? Because if you fix those things, I guarantee you'll immediately reduce some of the physical triggers that are leading to the emotional eating. Then what I want you to do is, and let me say again, this is all suggestive. You don't have to do any of this shit. You don't. But like I always say, whether we work together or not, I want to be able to help you. And if you're watching this or listening to this, let me help you. My suggestion here is you add one mindset tool, just one. 2 minutes a day of breathing. 2 minutes at the end of the day of journaling. How do I do that, Jonathan? You could start with something as simple as what's called a brain dump. You could literally take out a journal or a notepad or note in your phone. Just go to town, set a timer, 60-second timer, dump it all out. Clear your brain. A short walk. When you feel this urge to eat out of control coming on. Something that creates more space between you and the emotion. Because if you put more space between you and the emotion, there's going to be more space between you and the food. I also want you to consider tracking your food for 1 week. I mentioned that in the last episode. I'm mentioning it again here. This isn't to be perfect. This isn't to judge yourself. It's to start seeing the patterns and building awareness. So look, food was never the problem. Food was just the answer your body found when it didn't have a better one. The stress is real. The exhaustion is real. The loneliness, the overwhelm, the feeling of just needing one more moment that is yours. All of it is real. And food works sometimes, but it's not going to work forever. Not without consequences. But in these moments, temporarily, it can work. So before you beat yourself up for the 10th time this week, understand this. You aren't weak. You are human. And now we're just giving your body a better answer. Now, next episode, we're going to be talking about something that I know many of you have experienced because you've told me firsthand. You lose 5 pounds, you gain 7 back. You lose 10, you gain 15. You've been going back and forth for years, maybe decades. And every time the weight comes back, it feels like you're further behind than when you started. We're going to talk about yo-yo dieting. We're going to talk about why that keeps happening. And more importantly, what you need to do differently this time to stop it. And that wraps up today's episode of the Fit Woman Formula Podcast. I hope today's conversation helped you take one more step toward reclaiming your energy, rebuilding your body, and stepping into you 2.0. If you found this helpful, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss future episodes. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I'd really appreciate it if you left a quick rating or review. It helps more women discover the show. Ready to unlock the energy and confidence of your 20s while dropping 2+ sizes in the next 12 weeks without restrictive diets, useless supplements, or living in the gym? Visit fitwomanformula.com to learn how we've helped hundreds of women just like you. I'll see you in the next episode.